remember me? Where do Lordy, remember me? Where do Lord remember me?
Good morning, everyone. We are in a very special place. It's a cemetery that to me is very sacred and beautiful. It's Holt Cemetery. Holt is where the poor who can't afford above ground crypt are put to rest by their families. It's predominantly a African American cemetery. However, there are other races buried here. There's a lot of veterans. A lot of families that have been in New Orleans for over a century, maybe a couple centuries. Cemetery started, I believe, in the 1860s. And families have been able to bury their dead here for basically whatever the cost is to hire individuals to dig the ground, dig the grave, I guess. Lots of people today. Alright, everyone. This is attempt number 5 or 6 to film Holt Cemetery. For me, this is one of the most spiritual and beautiful, meaningful cemeteries in New Orleans. Also one of the busiest. There are a lot of unmarked graves here. And as I'm sure you already can tell, there's a lot of homemade plots and markers. And that's because the cemetery dates back, I believe, to the mid-1800s. And this is where the impoverished could bury their loved ones without having to worry about the expense. You just need to find someone that could bury your loved one. So that's the reason for the homemade markers. Or handmade, I should say. A lot of veterans buried here. This beautiful tree. World War I vet. Lots of vets. Vietnam War vet over here. to vet. Mason. It's pretty. Sadly, this cemetery made national news several years ago. When a self-proclaimed witch who lived here in Mid-City in the cemetery district would come over to Holt Cemetery after heavy rains and collect any bones that surfaced. Because it happens. I mean, these are in-ground burials, obviously. And so bones will surface. That's just what happens. And she was selling those bones. I think she was grinding them up for spells, or just, I know they made reports said that they made jewelry out of the bones, like finger bones and whatnot. And obviously that's illegal. Duh. It's hugely disrespectful. So she got caught. And she was prosecuted. I don't know if she served any time, but she does, I think, live out of state now, or at least not in New Orleans. She denies that that's where she got the bones, I believe. But still, I can't think of anything more disgusting than to disturb someone's grave. I'm sure well, I know that some people feel like what I'm doing by filming the cemeteries is in and of itself disrespectful. Certainly not my intent, but one of the things I've learned in life is intent and perception don't always meet, and perception is what determines a person's legacy. So, I don't know. I've had a few people, obviously, some in the comments, say that what I'm doing is disgusting or disrespectful, or if the majority of the people that visited the channel said that, I would stop. Probably reevaluate what I'm doing. That hasn't been the case so far. It's I think especially tricky when you're in a cemetery where it's filled with an impoverished portion of society. Like, this is maybe the most respect and reverence that they'll have in their lives is in their death, and that they are visited in a cemetery. So I don't want to I'm not diminishing that, the importance of that and the weight of that. It just I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone. Their lives were very hard, I'm sure. Don't know if I can get in here. We're going to do our best not to get bit by a snake or get ticks or any of those good things. World War I. Julian Ringgold Jr. Patrick Benoit. So, I think, with Holt Cemetery, I don't know if there's new burials, but if your family is already at rest here, I think you can be interred here. There's a term for it. I had to look it up. Sort of like a land rights clause. I think it's called servitude, some kind of servitude. There's a lot of vets here. A lot. When I first visited the cemetery, it was probably 8-ish years ago. It was very overgrown, but there was a crew here mowing and weed eating. And since there's these beautiful lights along this road, which I don't even remember if this was paved. I don't think it was. And there's these beautiful markers explaining so much about the history of the cemetery. So I find that very And it's impressive. Respect being given to the people in the cemetery, which I think is long overdue. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this cemetery. I know I've heard people refer to it as a slave cemetery. No, I don't think that's true. I mean, maybe there are slaves that were buried here because this was a, community cemetery. So maybe slaves were brought out here and buried. I don't know. I don't think that's true because I think slaves for the most part have been buried in cemeteries that are now lost in the quarter. I've heard the cemetery referred to as extremely haunted. I don't know. I certainly haven't experienced anything weird here. I've heard it referred to as a black cemetery, which I guess, the population of New Orleans is primarily African American, and there's a huge disparity in wealth in New Orleans. So, yeah. I mean, just Wikipedia, the mean family income for New Orleans, you'll see that it's dramatically changed over the since Katrina. But for the most part, it's below the poverty line. And those people can't afford mausoleums, much less make ends meet month to month. So, where are you going to be buried? Not in one of those picturesque cemeteries, where the tourists are visiting daily. Unless you have a family tomb. Which I hope you do. But for the most part, you have to rely on cemeteries such as this for burial or be cremated. But if you're Catholic, you need to be buried. So it is what it is. Don't want to get into a huge thing about social, economic, politics in New Orleans. I'll never shut up. I'm no expert. How beautiful is that? These oaks are just amazing. I have a really amazing photograph that was taken, I believe in the 50s, by a local photographer. He worked for a newspaper, and it's where we parked, where we first started filming. And And it's a guy, basically. You can see the handmade markers, and it's in shadow. It's like a foggy day, and the guy is carrying, I think, a coffin. Wait, I'm gonna post it to the video. Please tell me I didn't get a tick. How you doing? World War One vet, Israel kit. Beautiful. Another World War One vet over there. Lots of vets. World War One. Oh, sorry. You probably want to see that too. World War Two. There's a World War Two vet over there. So here's a question that I don't know the answer to. Maybe somebody can comment below if they know the answer to this. Obviously, there's veteran cemeteries all over the country, and then there's the huge one in Arlington. So why would veterans that we've seen in every cemetery, why would they be buried here instead of in a veteran cemetery? Is it money? Is it families wanting to be close to their loved ones, or they had already bought a burial plot, maybe planned ahead? I've always been curious about that. There is a lot of veterans here. A lot of World War One veterans. Look at this tree. Isn't this amazing? This old oak. It's incredible. So there is another story about this cemetery, at least one of its residents, that I have read about. I will clarify in the description, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I recall. Some of it might be wrong. There was an African American man who committed a crime. I believe he murdered a couple of people outside of New Orleans. Okay. He fled to New Orleans and was sitting on a stoop in front of a home with a friend or an acquaintance or an accomplice, I don't remember. And two cops walked by and harassed them, not knowing who he was. This led to a confrontation in which the suspect fled and, I believe, barricaded himself in a building and wound up getting involved in a shootout in which several police officers were killed, and he wound up being killed and tortured. And I believe he was even after his death, I believe, like, he was further disgraced. And he is somewhere, believed to be somewhere buried within Holt. It's an interesting story because obviously this wasn't a good person. I just find it very reflective of today's situations, racial situations, where a man was, this man killed people, but the police response was overwhelming, to the point of him being tortured and disgraced, which is, I don't know, makes me think, well, it doesn't make me think, I know that things don't change. I mean, things haven't changed in 100 years, or, I mean, more than 100 years, but at least since, like, let's say, modern society. Like, it isn't enough to simply arrest and try somebody for crimes they committed. They have to be victimized, disgraced, humiliated because they're black or a minority. Even in New Orleans, a city that has historically been a black city. Yeah. I don't know the answers. I just know what's right and wrong, what's heartbreaking. see a lot of Vietnam vets on World War I and World War II. Alright folks, I think that's it. World War I. Didn't really do this middle part.
Falling close behind, no, trying to hold up my sorrow and be brave, but I could not hold my sorrow when they let her in her grave. And the circle being broken in the sky, Lord, in the sky, and the circle being broken in the sky, Lord, in the sky. I was standing by my window one warm rainy day when that hearse come rolling